And so it was on the background of that, and then the First Intifada, where we got in 1994 the Oslo Accords. Now, the idea behind the Oslo Accords was that they were a starting point. They were supposed to be the stuff everybody could agree on, and everything else would sort of be in limbo until everyone went back to the negotiating table and, fleshed out an argument. Except that didn't really happen. And what we see here is the initial Oslo division of zones. So you have Zone A and Zone B, which are the brownish bits on the map. And these are areas of either Palestinian control, which is Zone A, or joint control. Now, really, in my experience, I've never seen one of these areas of joint control. If you're in something that's theoretically Zone B, it's almost always the Israelis controlling your movements, stopping you at checkpoints, not allowing Palestinian cars to go there, etc., etc. And so really only the dark brown, the dark brown bits are under the control of the Palestinian Authority. And you can already see how they sort of cohere into three regions, one in the south around Hebron, one in the middle around Ramallah, and then one in the north, which is Nablus and Jenin, and then Jericho being an outlier in the Jordan Valley. And this is very much in line with the Alon plan, because especially the Jordan Valley, you can see 95% of it is under Israeli control, and that's 50% military and 45% settler. So these are huge, huge areas. And in fact, the Palestinian population in the Jordan Valley has dropped by about, I think 80% since 1967 because of the Israeli settlement activity, but I'd like to actually get to that later. So here we have essentially the patterns, and the blue bits are the settlements. And you can see where the settlements are concentrated. You can see one sort of surrounding, a set of blue dots surrounding Jerusalem. And the idea behind that is to keep Jerusalem Israeli. So it becomes very difficult to separate Jerusalem from the rest, from an Israeli state. Because when we talk about the peace process, there's often these land swap ideas, which say that for major settlement blocks, we'll give Palestinians equal land. And the idea behind the major settlement blocks is that they make other bits, where Palestinians are numerous, inseparable. And one of these is East Jerusalem, which is surrounded by settlements. And the other ones, you can certainly see one that's sort of a finger up north of Salfit. And that's the Ariel settlement block, which also gets a lot of press. And the idea, that's another major settlement block, and the idea behind that is to divide the north of the country into two cantons. And so a future Palestinian state, should it arise, is very sort of, it's not territorially contiguous. It doesn't have any capacity to defend itself. It's not what we would ordinarily call a state. And so here I have a map of the major settlement blocks. And you can really see the sort of fingers going into the West Bank that have the aim of dividing the Palestinian territory. And of course the Jordan Valley remains non-negotiable. If you heard about the offer that America made to Netanyahu's government to, if they would just stop the settlements for 2 months, they'll get $3 billion in aid. And one of the aspects of that offer was to station American troops permanently in the Jordan Valley, because the Jordan Valley is seen by Israel as a non-negotiable aspect of its security. And again, this ties into the general sort of obsession with creating a geographically optimal realm of Israeli control, and achieving this by means, largely, of these settlement enterprises. So what you see is a very important one east of Jerusalem, which is the E1 block, as it's called. Ma'ale Adumim is the most famous. It's the third largest settlement. It's essentially a suburb of Jerusalem, and somewhat oddly, it's one of the most left-wing constituencies in the entirety of Israel. And the people who live there don't really consider themselves as living in a settlement. They view it as a sort of, I'm not really sure, but just as this part of Jerusalem where they don't make the connection between the location of their homes and the fact that that land used to be Palestinian and that they're part of this settlement enterprise. And this is true for a lot of settlers, because the vast majority are economic rather than religious or ideological settlers, meaning that they've moved there because it was a cheaper house, and they can't move out because that house is worthless. You can't sell a house in the settlement because new houses are springing up all the time faster than there are people to move into them, because the government and a variety of private organizations are actively subsidizing expansion of these places. And even a recent poll found that I think 40 or 45% of settlers would be willing to move out in the event of a Palestinian peace process. But the central government certainly does not view that as optimal because it sees these areas as strategically indispensable, essentially. And the northern one, the northern sort of finger, the one that includes Ariel there up by Salfit, is also important, for one, because it controls some of the highest areas in Samaria, which is the mountain range in that part of Israel. And it also has an important effect on water sources. A lot of the wadis flow down from that part of the mountains. And again, it's seen as essential to the sort of cantonization of the Palestinian state.